Welcome back. Last time we discussed the hierarchy of faculties that God has given human beings and the role of the intellect in reading nature as Ayatullah, a sacred text analogous to the Quran for finding God in all things. Now let's see how numbers, which are the basis for mathematics and other sciences, are Ayatullah as well. In Arabic, it's very clear. The number 1 is pronounced wahid and is the principle of all numbers. 1 is the mother of all numbers, you might say, since all numbers are the projection of the number 1. And of course, Allah is El-Wahid, the One, which is the divine name we discussed at the beginning of the course. And of course, everything comes from Allah, El-Wahid, and returns to Him. In the Quran, this is expressed in the phrase, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi rajiun. Verily we are for God, and verily unto Him are we returning. Now you can see this metaphysical principle mathematically in the following series of multiplications based on the number 1. The 1 is always the same and unchangeable, and that is why the number 1 has itself as a product when multiplied by itself. And when you enter the world of multiplicity with 2 1s, or 11, and multiply it by itself, you get 121, or 121, starting with 1 and returning to 1. Increasing multiplicity with 3 1s, or 111, and multiplying it by itself, leads to greater multiplicity of 1, 2, 3, 2, 1, but still starting with 1 and returning to 1. The same pattern applies as we increase multiplicity with 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9 1s, always starting and returning to 1. As Plotinus, the Neoplatonic philosopher, said, all things are full of signs, and it is a wise man who can learn about one thing from another. So there's a qualitative aspect to the number 1, symbolizing God as creator, not only a quantitative aspect. And this qualitative aspect is what allows us to understand the number 1 as an ayah of Allah. It's a shame that children are exposed to numbers merely as quantities instead of qualities today. If only they could see numbers as symbols of principles available to teach us about God and the natural structure and processes of the universe, mathematics would be so much more meaningful and engaging. Before going on to the symbolism of 2 and 3, let's briefly discuss the symbolism of 0. Let's begin with the very orthography of 0 in Arabic, which is written as a dot, like a point. This itself is very profound, since the dimensionless point is the geometric analog to the mathematical 0. But it's the no thing, not nothing, that produces everything. Why is that? Because if we extend a point, we get a line. And if we extend a line, we get a plane. And if we extend a plane, we get 3-dimensional space. Now, one can represent the divine essence by the point. As one scholar points out, no pun intended, quote, it would doubtlessly be less inadequate to represent it, the divine essence, by the void. But the void is not properly speaking a figure. And if we give the essence a name, we can, with the same justification and the same risk, represent it by a sign. The simplest and thus the most essential sign is the point, unquote. If the world is plenitude, then the divine essence will be the void. This metaphysical understanding of 0 leads to an understanding of the mathematical 0 as follows. 0 stands above the series of numbers, like the essence of God stands above His divine names and attributes. That is why there are 2 names for God's oneness in Islam, El-Ahad and El-Wahid, which we discussed at the beginning of the semester. But I didn't explain why we have these 2 names for God. El-Ahad refers to the oneness of the divine essence, whereas El-Wahid refers to the oneness of God on the level of his divine names and attributes. Zero therefore symbolizes El-Ahad, the divine essence, the void, and one symbolizes El-Wahid, or unity on the level of the diverse names and qualities. So zero has unique mathematical properties symbolizing the divine essence. For example, when you add or subtract zero from any other number, nothing happens, since the divine essence is the void relative to the multiplicity of the world. But if you divide any number by zero, it explodes, because the divine essence is itself infinite. At the same time, if you multiply any number by zero, it reduces it to nothing, just as everything is nothing compared to the divine essence. But this no thing gives us everything, since adding a few zeros to our paycheck gives us a small fortune. It's remarkable that the very orthography of zero in Arabic, or how zero is written, and the pronunciation of one in Arabic, wahid, and the divine name El-Wahid, make the metaphysical meanings of these numbers as Ayatullah crystal clear. That concludes our discussion of the metaphysical symbolism of the numbers 0 and 1. And in the next segment, we'll turn to the symbolism of the numbers 2 and 3, before discussing the profound implications of this symbolism for numbers in other sciences.